Then,
Great.
Yep. And
Cool.
then you should be able to share your screen now.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to be talking to you guys today about how we can increase the practicality of functional communication training for use in applied settings like schools. A little bit of background first. So what is problem behavior? Why are we talking about it here? So when I say problem behavior, I'm talking about behavior that is harmful to the person or to other people, or behavior that limits a person's access to the environment or to resources. So some examples of what that commonly looks at are things like property destruction, disruptive behavior, elopement, aggression, self-injury, active noncompliance, or defiance. And when I'm talking about persistent problem behavior, I mean behavior that hasn't responded to a more basic targeted intervention. So kind of general environmental supports, modifying the curriculum, kind of basic reinforcement strategies. And so for whom is this kind of persistent problem behavior a problem? Children with disabilities are at greater risk for engaging in persistent problem behavior, and children with intellectual and developmental disabilities are more likely to engage in problem behavior than their typically developing peers, especially those who have intellectual disabilities or autism. And so this is probably at least in part because children with IDDs often have communication deficits that impede their learning of how to appropriately express their wants and needs the way that we do, and that set the stage for the development of problem behavior. The general treatment approach for persistent problem behavior is to begin with a function-based assessment. And then we use the results of that assessment to inform a function-based intervention. So we figure out what in the environment or is triggering and maintaining problem behavior. We build an intervention around those results. So one specific efficacious function-based intervention approach for children with IDDs is functional communication training. So basically, functional communication training is an intervention where a child learns to use a functional communicative response to request functional reinforcers for problem behavior instead of using problem behavior. So they get a replacement response for problem behavior. And so a basic example of what this might look like if we have a child who engages in escape maintained property destruction. In other words, they are, breaking things in order to escape something, probably academic demands if this is happening in a classroom. Then the sort of baseline condition, what's typically been happening in the classroom is the teacher is presenting some academic task. The student is doing something like breaking their pencil, tearing up the work. And then there is kind of a delay or a break from instruction. And that's not necessarily purposeful. The teacher's not like, oh, I'm going to give this child a break because they're engaging in problem behavior. It might be something like the teacher needs to go and find a replacement pencil or a replacement worksheet because the child has destroyed what they were using. So it's often accidental reinforcement. And so what happens during FCT is we change this contingency. So now when the child is presented with that task that typically evokes problem behavior, we teach them to request a break instead. And so they might be saying something like break please, or they might be pressing a button on their communication device to get access to a break. The other often necessary piece of this intervention is that we also have to change what happens for problem behavior. So now when the child engages in that property destruction, if the math is presented, the teacher is ready with another pencil, another worksheet. She is ready to continue presenting the task so that the child no longer gets a break from work. They only get that break when they use their new communication response. So what we know about the research on FCT is that FCT is efficacious for children with a range of IDDs, including those with autism, and for a range of forms or topographies of problem behavior. And it's also efficacious for a wide range of age groups, all the way from young children up through adults. We have the most evidence for kind of elementary school age children or so. And the evaluation context that much of this research has taken place in is clinical settings with researchers as implementers and extinction for problem behavior, which is that procedure I described where the work is continued to be presented when problem behavior happens. In other words, we withhold reinforcement for problem behavior during FCT. What we don't yet know about FCT from the research is how can we best increase the practicality of FCT for sustained use over time in applied settings like schools. And so some important questions we need to address are what procedures might make FCT more practical and sustainable for use in schools, and what procedures can teachers implement with sufficient fidelity to produce desired outcomes. If we return for a minute to this kind of diagram of what FCT looks like, you might be thinking to yourself, this looks great that the child is using communication now, but what about that work that they were asked to do? It doesn't look like they now have to do it. And you're right, during this initial stage of FCT, the child is getting out of work anytime they ask for a break, and that's not sustainable in the long term. We need to make sure that they're making academic progress, and we're increasing their tolerance for doing the academic work that typically caused problems. So the next thing we need to address in FCT interventions is this work completion part of things. How do we increase the tolerance for work? And I'm describing kind of all of this example here around escape, maintain, problem behavior. So problem behavior that functions to get out of the academic work. This same logic applies to behaviors that serve other functions, like accessing items or activities or accessing teacher attention. For simplicity, I'm going to stick with our escape, maintain, problem behavior for today for explaining this though. So we address academic work completion typically by slowly increasing the frequency or the difficulty of demands using a procedure called demand fading, often with a chained schedule, which is where we signal when the student needs to work and when reinforcement or that break is available. And I'll give an example of that. For those of you who would like a technical definition for this procedure, we have them here. So a chain schedule in our behavior speak here is it is a compound schedule of reinforcement with schedule correlated stimuli, so signals to the child on which basic schedule is in place. And completing one schedule component, in other words, like one work task, produces the next schedule component, and reinforcement only becomes available once the individual successively completes all the basic schedules. In other words, successively completes all the work. We also have this tandem schedule, which is almost the exact same thing as a chain schedule, but it doesn't include those schedule correlated stimuli. In other words, the child might not be clear on when it is time to work and when they are allowed to ask for a break. So here's our practical example of what this looks like. We might now ask a child or tell a child they need to complete these 2 work tasks. And then once they've completed those 2 tasks, then they can ask for a break. And with a chained schedule, we often provide some sort of added stimulus beyond like it's time to work to help the child distinguish whether it's work time or break time. So you can see that the work time here is red and the break time is green. So often we'll use like a red index card to signal right now we need to be working, and we'll change it to a green index card when the child can ask for a break and receive one. And over time, as the child shows they're able to do this without engaging in problem behavior, we increase the difficulty by asking them to do more work before they are allowed to ask for a break and receive one. The benefits of using this approach to what we call schedule thinning with FCT is that this is sort of a logical way to thin schedules of reinforcement in classrooms, because the goal is, almost always to get the child to participate more with academic work, with whatever is going on in the classroom. And so it naturally kind of promotes the child's tolerance for those difficult or triggering situations when we combine it with demand fading, so where we're progressively increasing what the child's being asked to do. And the chain schedules, so the ones with those schedule correlated stimuli, there's some evidence to suggest they might facilitate response discrimination because of those visual or auditory cues. In other words, the child more quickly picks up on like, oh, right now it's time for me to work, or right now I can ask for a break, I can take a break. What we don't know from the literature is despite these chained and tandem schedules being used in research, there are not systematic reviews or meta-analyses that summarize the effects or describe the specific circumstances under which they're most effective. And so the purpose of the study that I'm going to talk about today was a systematic review and meta-analysis where we wanted to summarize the characteristics of FCT interventions that used chained and tandem schedules. So we're combining here FCT and chained and tandem schedules. We wanted to evaluate the efficacy of these schedules on reductions in and resurgence of problem behavior. And we wanted to start to look at potential moderators of these schedules' effects. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to focus on bits and pieces of this review. I'm going to talk about a few of the descriptive findings, and then we'll talk about the efficacy of these chained and tandem schedules on problem behavior. So for our method, we used a variety of electronic databases and ancestral search to identify articles, and we identified 38 articles that met our inclusion criteria. We coded a lot of different descriptive data. I'm just going to talk about the setting and implementer today. It's going to be kind of most relevant to the work I'm doing right now with the Embry funding I have. And then we also looked at treatment efficacy using multiple measures of behavior change and effect size. So all of the studies in this review were single case experimental designs. And there is not a standard effect size measure for single case studies. There are a lot of complications in calculating effect size when we have single case data. So we used a range of different measures to kind of get at behavior change and overlap in effect size using a few different metrics. We used log response ratio, which has been evaluated for use in meta-analyses. We conducted our meta-analysis using log response ratio. We also looked at mean baseline reductions in problem behavior, success rate, which captures the percentage of evaluations in which we were able to identify a functional relation between the chain schedule and problem behavior. And we used tau-u, which is a commonly used overlap measure in single case experimental design. We also looked at resurgence, which is a measure of adverse effects, and I'm not going to talk about that one today. So we found across those 38 articles, there were a total of 107 participants and 131 cases or evaluations of chained or tandem schedules. Looking at the setting, we found that most of these studies were conducted in outpatient clinic settings. There were a few that were conducted in schools. And in terms of implementers, most of these studies were implemented by researchers. A few had teachers implemented. And these numbers are displayed at the case level, so at the individual evaluation. These scatter plots show reductions in problem behavior. The scatter plot on the left here shows cases in which problem behavior was measured using a rate. And on the right here, these are cases in which problem behavior was measured using intervals. What we see overall here is that there are large decreases in problem behavior when these chained and tandem schedules were in place relative during baseline conditions. And when we look at MBLR3, or this is the mean baseline reduction in problem behavior when we're comparing the final 3 baseline sessions to the final 3 treatment sessions, we see that there was little more than a 90% reduction in problem behavior across the 2 schedule types. That was about a 94% reduction for chain schedules compared to an 81% reduction for tandem schedules. We then pulled out the experimental evaluations of chained and tandem schedules. So for most of these studies, experimenters established control in the single case design during the FCT phase, so before the chained or tandem schedule was in place. And then they sort of descriptively evaluated the effects of the chained and tandem schedules later. These 7 studies did actual experimental evaluations of the chained and tandem schedules. So only these studies were included in the meta-analysis because these are the ones for which we can infer causal relations between the dependent variables and the chained or tandem schedules. And so we see that for these 7 studies, there were large reductions in problem behavior looking at MBLR3. Tau-u showed that there were between moderate to very large decreases in problem behavior. And the success rates were generally quite high with the exception of this one study. So this is a forest plot of our meta-analysis results for log response ratio. And the meta-analysis showed there was a significant effect of the chained and tandem schedules on problem behavior. So what does this mean? There were a few important takeaways from this study that I'm using to inform my research right now. One is that this review supports the use of chained and tandem schedules, particularly chain schedules. And we had a moderator analysis that looked at that, and we didn't have time to get into that today. It also highlighted the need for more experimental evaluations of chain schedules. So the fact that only 7 of those 38 evaluations were true experimental evaluations of chain schedules is problematic. We need more rigorous data showing the effects of these schedules. And it emphasized the strong need for more school-based evaluations with teachers as implementers. There's still very little data showing the effects of these interventions in those contexts. So what I'm doing with that data right now, my current research I'm collecting as pilot data for an R15 proposal, I'm evaluating the effects of FCT with chain schedules on problem behavior, those communication responses that we teach during FCT and work completion for children with IDDs in classroom settings and with teachers as implementers. And part of that is also includes evaluating the effects of this stepwise training model on teachers' treatment integrity during FCT. So how can we train teachers to do this well in a way that's sort of not overwhelming and is sustainable for them? And so from here, I plan to develop an evaluation process for individualizing FCT interventions for children with IDDs in school settings. So how can we kind of start from this template and then make it work for this particular child and teacher in context, and look at training models for teaching teachers how to implement FCT in their classrooms. And I think we have a few minutes for questions if anyone has them.
Thank you, Jessie. And I realized that we were trying to solve our tech issues early on and that I didn't get a chance to do an introduction of you either. So,
fine.
Yeah, so Dr. Jessie Torelli, who's an assistant professor in special education, correct?
Yep.
In the School of Teacher Ed at WKU. And any questions for Jessie? I had one just as I was listening. I know I heard you present on this before, and then today I wondered how, as an intervention, how commonly used is this type of intervention just within this population, whether in clinical settings or in schools, and if people are trained in it, it seems pretty effective.
Yeah, so in clinic settings, it is widely used. I would say it's kind of the primary approach. If a student is or a child is getting sort of like intensive behavior analytic intervention outside of schools and they have problem behavior, they're almost certainly using FCT, but it is not at all commonly used in schools. So I would say it's not very common for teachers to receive training on FCT unless they've got kind of a graduate degree that included some coursework in applied behavior analysis. So I think that's really where the gap is how do we make sure teachers are trained in this and we figure out ways to use it in classrooms.
Yeah, if kids within their classroom settings have an aide, would that person be able to receive training in that too?
Yeah, and that's with the pilot data I'm collecting now, I'm actually working with the educational assistant, and she is the primary implementer. She works with the student all day, and she is the one that's implementing it that I'm training to use it. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you. And I hope you continue to make progress on all that pilot data you're collecting.
Thank you.
All right, so our next presenter is Dr. Xiaowen Chen, who's assistant professor in psychological sciences here at WKU. And I will let her share her screen and take it away.
Thank you. So, hello everybody, can you see my screen?
Yep.
So, okay, thanks. So thank you everybody for attending the virtual seminar. And I'm Xiaowen Chen, assistant professor from Western Kentucky University. So today I'm going to talk about several ways to apply machine learning techniques to study organizational behaviors. So, okay. So I'm industry organizational psychologist. So my research focus on the organizational behaviors like workers' performance, engagement, behavior, retention, stress, emotion, and emotion commitment. Meanwhile, I also focused on the personnel selection, performance appraisal, assessment tool development, and validation. Besides that, I also do cross-cultural psychology research. So currently at WKU, I established a big data lab for organizational effectiveness study. And we conducted a study with traditional research and analysis methods. Meanwhile, we also try to explore the application of machine learning to support our traditional research methods. So currently, there are 11 graduate and undergraduate students from computer science, psychological, and data science and mathematics. Before we talk about machine learning application, I would like to briefly introduce or discuss AI and the machine learning. They are very hot buzzy words and are often used alternatively. So, but according to my understanding, the two are overlapping but different. AI or artificial intelligence is a broader concept that covers all the smart activities carried by machine. Its concentration is mimicking human behavior, human decision procedure, process, and carrying out the task in ever more human ways. For instance, in our daily life, the iRobot, iHome, or we can see from the social media like a human machine chess competition. Or in the hospital, we can see AI sensor is used to check patient movements or to check the seizure. So that is AI. But machine learning focused on to explore the data pattern. So usually is a way we feed the computer with large amount of data, then let the computer to explore the data pattern and predict the behavior tendency. And so also we can let the computer to use those large amount of data to classify and recognize recognize So that is machine learning. And in my lab, we usually use machine learning to reach two purposes. One is data collection, another is data analysis. So for the data collection, as we know in psychology, it's the traditional way we use experiment or we use survey questionnaire to collect the human participant data. And but all the survey and the questionnaire is subject to all types of bias, and also it's expensive and time consumer. And we found that actually there's a lot of online data. It's available and could give us very insightful findings about human behaviors. So the first thing we do is use machine learning algorithm to web scrape the online data and then transfer to the structured data for analysis. And the second one is data analysis. Once we get the massive data, what are we going to do? And we can't use traditional algorithm statistic to process the huge amount of data. What we can do, we can use machine learning techniques. If our data is quantitative data, then machine learning algorithm can help us to build more accurate predictive models and in much shorter short time, is high speed. And if we get qualitative data, for instance, in my lab, our major big data type is text data. So we can use machine learning technique to analyze text pattern, the combination, or the the classification for classification. So it's similar with the traditional data, but the traditional data we use reader to do coding stuff. But with the massive data, it's impossible for let the human being to coding all those text data. So machine learning techniques can use for that. There's another way, another name is natural language processing to analyze the text data. And but in the biomedical science, it's a little bit differences. So researchers usually feed the computer with a lot of medical case data to identify and diagnose. So that is, for instance, the breast. For instance, they will feed the computer tons of image, and then let the computer to analyze image and find the pattern and detect the cancer or detect the, or we can say some health issues in the very beginning. So, and now I would like to use two of my past research and ongoing research to demonstrate some machine learning techniques. So first of all, and I would like to show you how to use machine learning techniques to categorize the content. So this research is that we try to extract the qualifications and the competencies required by the leadership position in the labor market. So first thing, we go into collect the data. So we don't go to interview employers, ask about what is the required qualifications or competencies for their manager position. Instead, we go to the employment website like Indeed, Glassdoor. In this case, we use Indeed.com, and we use the keywords manager and senior manager, try to collect all the management positions from Indeed. And the data, we collect the data including job title, location, company, salary, job description, then transfer to the structured data like this. So this is CSV format. It is ready for the computer to continue the process. And for this project, we collected 7,885 manager positions and 7,374 senior manager positions across 50 states. If we want it, we can continue web scraping and get more cases for our study. So that is one advantage for machine learning. And the data to us is unlimited. Every day there's a new job advertisement popped up, we get new data. So our data with machine learning, we can get continuous data calculation. And then once we get the data collection, we collect the data and we to try to categorize the data and to see what requirements, what's the qualification or requirements by the manager position. So here we use topic modeling, one content categorization technique by machine learning. That is the result. The algorithm tells us the possible topics, and under each topics, they will show us the keywords, and also the number indicates the relative importance of each keyword under a topic. And I know the outcome looks, it's a little difficult because that's a text, but we can let the computer to visualize the data like this. So in this way, it's easier to read, right? You can see under each topic, there's a keywords, a list of keywords, the relative importance also illustrated by the bar. So it's easier for our reader to make a final decision. So the funding for this, of course, I just show you part of this research project. So based on the indeed data sets, we extracted 15 leadership competencies and dispositions. So that is data. That's the way we could use the machine learning technique to categorize the our content data. And the second one, I would like to talk about another thing about how can we use the machine learning to analyze person's stress or emotion. So as we know, there's recently a lot of research papers were published to discuss COVID increase worker stress and reduce the organizational commitment. But all those research actually have common limitation. They collect the data after the COVID outbreak. Actually, they don't have the data, the stress level or commitment level data that before the COVID. So seems like all the study is post hoc study. And technically, we need a control group data and also experiment group or conditional group data, right? But for this situation, if we use traditional way, we can only get the experiment group. We actually don't know what's the stress level and the commitment level in the before the COVID. So how could we solve this problem? And one thing is that we can use the online review data. It post before COVID happened. And also those company review data continue generated during the pandemic crisis. So in that case, we can use machine learning to collect the data. This time, our study is focused on the Fortune 300 company online review data. And we pay specific attention to the two types of questions. One question is that, how do you feel about going to work each day at a company? And how do you feel about telling people you worked at a company? So in that case, we can get the data before the COVID outbreak and after. And that is data set, because we only focused on Fortune 300. So you can see that is industry code and the company name, question, 2 questions, answers, and also the date before COVID outbreak and after COVID outbreak. Totally, we got the, we found it online, and actually there's 277 companies have online review data to the 2 questions. Those companies across 10 industry. But if we will need more data sets, we can just extend our data collection to Fortune 500 or even to all the American companies. So that is one advantage of data collection with machine learning. After we get those data, this time we want to check about the stress level. All we can say is that the workers' emotion or satisfaction to their job, to their common organization. So in that case, we do sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis is try to evaluate the attitude or emotion in a continuum from extremely positivity to extreme negativity. So the value range from the value range is from 1 to -1. Positive value means positive attitude, emotion, and the negative value means the negative emotion and attitude. So for the first question, how do you feel about going to work each day? And you can see that is 0. Zero line means, okay, neutral, neither positive nor negative. And this is positive. So you can see across 10 industry, the employees' daily feeling about their job. In some industry, actually, there are not a lot of variance. But in the healthcare and the social assistant industry, they have significant difference. You can see the big drop from neutral to very negative. And let's go to the next question. How do you feel about telling people you work at your company? That is assess affective commitment or emotion attachment to their company. And you could have found that actually for the employees or workers, their commitment or emotional commitment to their company relative very positive. And but some industry varied a lot, but most industries still keep similar. Even you can see their differences like in the information industry, but statistic analysis result, the change is not significant. Only 2 industries, the change is significant. So that's the 2 ways to apply machine learning techniques. So any questions?
What are your, I guess, plans for future projects with machine learning?
Future practice, actually, the second study is ongoing project. So we would to go to more detail. And also we built some model between work stress and the engagement, commitment, and also we want to check about the industry differences. So that will be one project. And the second one, because currently there's so many fatality happen in the workplace. So another project we use is try to detect the stressors in the workplace with machine learning.
Sounds good. It's actually like very different work, since Jessie's is like single case and then yours is like big data.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to kind of see the research methods across the spectrum there. But you know, they each fit those particular situations. So
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
Thanks for coordinating this, Amy.
Yeah, thank you, Amy.
And I'll send them the link so they can distribute this, because I know they were trying to do it all through their own Zoom account, but obviously having trouble adding people to be the host. So thank you for your patience as we work that out. And thanks for presenting today.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Lexi.